Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into today's webcast. My name is Zina M. Pagan, ARF's Marketing Manager, and I will be your moderator for today. Before we pivot to streaming, please be aware of our house rules. We are aiming to provide the best webcast experience possible. You can help us execute this by muting yourself and keeping your web camera turned off. The audio will be streamed. This means that you will be able to hear us through your computer speakers. However, if you prefer to use a teleconference option, please use the information provided on your screen. Additionally, I will post the information on the chat box throughout the webcast. Should you have any questions during the session, please send these to me using the chat box. ARF does not own the rights to the presentation. We will share the recorded session in 2 weeks. The file will be available then for all of ARF's members. We are extending the conversation on social media. If you'd like to join us, please use #ARFWebcast. If you're interested in hosting a webcast of your own, please contact me at zina@thearf.org. Our next webcast will be held on May 3rd with Mighty Hive on the state of programmatic. Also, if you're in the Bay Area on May 3rd, join Carolyn Wu from Kantar Added Value and Bin Yu from the University of California, Berkeley for our Women in Analytics luncheon. And last but not least, our audience measurement conference is in June. To take advantage of our early bird rate, register by April 30th. You could save $400 if you do. If you're interested in any of these events or other ARF programs, you can visit our website for further details or contact me at zina@thearf.org. And without further delay, I present to you today's webcast, Pivot to Streaming with Gabriel Contijo from Facebook. Gabriel and Adam, sorry, Adam, I blanked out on yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Zina. First of all, I want to thank you, Zina, for organizing this and ARF for having us here today. We're really excited to be presenting this study that we did earlier this year. And I'm Gabriel. I'm a researcher here at Facebook on this thing that is called Facebook IQ. And basically what we do is we try to understand people's behavior and translate that to marketers on how to build better campaigns and advertise better. And I think that Adam can explain that a little bit better.
Yeah, so I'm Adam. I work with Gabriel kind of on the content side. So he does the research, and then we turn it into something that all of you fine people can enjoy. So the way it works is before we kind of developed Facebook IQ, we were getting a lot of questions about whether or not Facebook ads work. So it started as kind of something for us. And then the questions started to change over time, which is, how do I make all of my advertising better? And that's when we formed Facebook IQ to answer that question, a more holistic way to help marketers succeed in this kind of ever-changing landscape. So we recognize that in a world where technology is moving so fast and consumers are often outpacing business in terms of technology, we have an obligation to help businesses understand how consumer behavior and advertising best practices are changing. So clients are kind of looking to us to share insights from our rich repository of data. We have 1.7 billion people on Facebook alone, and even more across our family of apps and services. So we're able to offer insight and foresight into people's attitudes and behaviors across generations, geographies, devices, and time that you're pretty much unable to find elsewhere. So let's start by looking at some of our research and how we leverage this internal data that we have to meet our goals here. So before we get into our specific study, this is a quick overview of what Facebook IQ covers. We have people insights, vertical insights, and advertising insights. What we're going to be talking about today is vertical insights, where this team that Gabriel and I work on tries to understand how the changing world is disrupting the path to purchase. And we look at a lot of verticals like automotive, financial services, gaming, and more. And today we're looking at entertainment, specifically how the rise of streaming has changed the game. So when we were looking to kind of figure out why streaming, this quote kind of sums up a lot for us, that new technologies that let us watch what we want on whatever device we want are transforming traditional television viewing habits. This came from a BBC News story that was reporting on the Nielsen data that some people might have seen last year, essentially saying that even though only a few years ago watching TV meant going home, flipping on the television, scrolling through channels, today people are cutting their cable services in favor of cheaper, more mobile streaming services. You may have seen this trend reported on, and you may be familiar with this phrase, cord cutter, somebody who had a cable subscription and has canceled it in favor of streaming. Even further, entertainment marketers specifically are handling an entire new type of customer, somebody that we call the cord never, a person who never had a cable subscription to begin with. It's natural to wonder how people's behavior is going to change as a result of these emerging media platforms, because a lot of the information and data that we have is based on kind of a false premise, this idea that everybody is going home and flipping on television. So we're trying to kick off, along with a lot of other people, some research into how some of these traditional beliefs that people hold in advertising need to change based on the new media platforms.
So what we did from a methodological point of view is something that we always try to do with all of our research is first to take a look at our internal data. We have a very rich database that we work with, and for this particular study, it was not different. We basically divided this methodology in three different pieces. So the first piece, we were trying to understand the conversation around the topic. So we were trying to understand how people were talking about streaming and TV shows over the course of 2016. We observed the whole year. And then on the second moment, we were looking at how were the different demographics of those people that were interested in streaming and TV shows. And after taking a look and digging through all of that, we decided to also make a survey to complement all this data that we didn't, with data that we couldn't see from our internal perspective. So we surveyed over 2,000 people in the US and Canada to understand how they were viewing, how were their habits when they were watching TV shows and streaming shows. And to do that, we basically classified people in three different groups. We classified them on people that were intensive on the usage of streaming platforms, people that were intensive on the usage of TV platforms, and a hybrid, which is people that use both at about the same amount of time or the same amount of shows they watch on both. And the first thing that we saw as a result of our research is that the streaming is inspired by millennials. We saw there is a difference in demographics on people's behavior, and when it comes to streaming, millennials are shifting this thought. We see that that other than that, we also saw that multicultural groups, they have different behavior. We saw that African Americans, they are more likely to be discussing streaming shows than any other topics that they discuss in our platforms. And US Hispanics and Asian Americans, they are actually less likely to be talking about streaming content than other topics that they are talking in our platforms. So looking a little bit at the conversation that was happening in our platforms, we saw that when people were talking about shows that were originally from cable TV, we saw that they were more concerned about talking about the environment that they were watching the show. So people that they were watching the show with, like their friends, their family, the moment that they were watching, so tonight, and how that felt. On the other hand, when we were looking at how people were talking about streaming shows, we saw that they were focusing more on the specific aspects of the show. So they were talking about specific episodes that they watched, or they were anticipating that they were going to watch. They were talking about how they like or dislike the episode that they watched, and how it's their favorite TV show or not. One other thing that we noticed that is different when people are talking about shows in our platforms is that people they like different kinds of shows depending if they're watching TV or if they're watching streaming. Usually TV users they like more shows that are sports shows, talk shows, or news programs. So it's very connected with live TV. And while streaming viewers they are actually focusing on comedies, movies, and documentaries for their preferences on shows. While looking at the volume of conversation that was happening on these shows in our platforms, we were trying to map how that was happening throughout the year. So specifically for streaming shows, actually for both shows, we thought that the moments that we see the biggest amount of posts and commenting on any given day happens during premieres and finales, and sometimes when it's a big show, also on major episodes that is happening in between. And to observe this with a little more detail, we look at a specific show that is the HBO's Game of Thrones that you probably saw #Winter is coming in your newsfeed before. So what happened in this show, we thought that it was already a very popular show. So we thought that people anticipated with 2 weeks that the season was about to premiere. So people started to talk a lot about the show 2 weeks before the premiere, and that lasted throughout the whole season that the show was on, and lasted until 3 weeks after the finale. And that's when people finally stopped talking about this show. So one thing for us that was not a big surprise was that Millennial is the ones leading the shift towards streaming. We saw that in the U.S., in our survey, 77% of people were actually Millennials that were watching streaming, that were focused on streaming viewing, and in Canada it was 71%. But that doesn't mean that the other generations are not growing on them the usage of streaming, but that just means that they're coming at a slower pace than the Millennials are.
I'll add one thing there, which is that when we were studying Millennials, Gen X, and the Boomer generation, one thing that was interesting was that the Gen X actually led in the hybrid group, the combination of streaming and television, which is interesting because you can almost see as the ages change how people's kind of breakdown of TV versus streaming changes, which is interesting to see how the Gen X is kind of caught in the middle of this change.
Yeah, so when looking at our internal data, we saw that Millennials, in fact, they are 1.2 times more likely to be talking about streaming show than any other topics that they're talking in our platforms. So they're really intensive on talking about their favorite shows, their favorite streaming shows that they're following. And opposed to that, we saw that Boomers, they are actually 1.7 times less likely to be talking about streaming show in our platforms compared to any other topics that they are discussing in our platforms. So it's very clear to us that Millennials, they are really intensive on the usage of streaming, and they're leading this shift at this moment.
So the second kind of big finding that we came up with is more behavioral, and this is kind of the meat of what we wanted to get into. And this is that streaming viewers, we call it streaming viewers demand their favorites. Essentially that in our internal data and paired with this survey data, it became clear to us that streaming viewers think that the availability of their favorite content is the most important factor when picking a provider, whereas traditional TV viewers care a little bit more about the hit to their wallet, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, because that might be confusing to some because of the price difference between cable and streaming. But it's true that while the average paid cable TV subscription is more costly than any single streaming service, it may be that TV viewers value the cost relative to the amount of service they get, whereas streaming viewers value access to specific shows. So it's less about the fact that TV viewers are interested in having something cheap. It's more about the fact that with all of the channels they get with their cable TV subscription, they feel like they're getting a great value for their monthly payments, where streaming viewers are much more likely not to really care about that. They're really concerned about whether or not their favorite content is on that platform. Now, that's not to say they're not concerned about price. Price was still the second most common reason that they cited as for what they value in a content provider. And I'd also like to point out here in the third column, the ability to watch content at my own pace. So you can see that TV viewers don't cite this as one of their big things that they value in a content provider. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, because TV viewers are conditioned to watch shows at the pace of the network. But the expectation is starting to rise that I get to watch my favorite show when I want it. And even in the hybrid TV and streaming viewers, the pace of content was actually cited as more important even for streaming viewers. And what that tells us is that people that have traditional cable subscriptions may be starting to think that that's not enough. I have certain shows I need to watch at my own pace, and therefore I'm supplementing my cable subscription with a streaming subscription. And earlier when we were talking about cord cutters and cord nevers, this hybrid group, we suspect, is a group that some people have been referring to as cord shavers, which are people that traditionally do have a cable TV subscription but are cutting it down to add streaming services. And I think this kind of meshes well with that Gen X trend that we were talking about earlier, in that there's this transitional group of people that is starting to become potentially frustrated with the inability to watch their favorite show. So when we get into the survey data a little bit more to show how streaming users are different than some of these other users, I'm going to hero 3 stats here. And one of the first ones is that streaming users are 2.2 times more likely than TV users to be willing to pay a monthly fee to watch without ads. We think this is really interesting because earlier this kind of meshes with the finding about streaming users being more interested in their favorite show than what they're paying, because here they're willing to pay more even if they're getting less channels to see their favorite show kind of in a pure way. They don't want to watch ads. They paid to watch a show, and once the show is over, they're satisfied. They're not necessarily interested in whatever advertisers want to say in the middle of their show if they can pay to avoid it. And one of the things that I think this is pretty relevant for ad marketers is that we need to be very careful about when we time ads, because it may be that streaming users are frustrated or expect a pure viewing experience of their show. And that's something that can be handled with when people decide to time their ads. Another stat that I'd like to cover here is that streaming users are almost 1.5 times more likely than TV users to subscribe to a smaller set of channels at a lower price. Now, what's interesting about this to me is that this small set of channels contains their favorite content. So even though it's a lower price, we're not seeing them care about the value. So if you drop somebody from, say, the 1,500 channels they have before down to a much smaller group of channels, even if the price doesn't drop at a commensurate rate, people are still going to be, or at least streaming users, are going to be satisfied if that set of channels has the content that they call their favorite. And one more stat I'd like to call out here is streaming users are 2.1 times more likely than TV users to watch back-to-back episodes instead of weekly episodes. A lot of this, you may have heard this phrase, binge watching. It's this kind of trend of watching television, where people are sitting down to watch episode after episode after episode, which is something that, unless your favorite network back in the 90s would run a marathon, people aren't really used to this type of television behavior. And it's something that marketers need to kind of update their strategies to take into account. One thing that I also thought was interesting about this statistic is that even within this group, women are 1.23 times more likely than men to choose a show based on how many episodes are available to binge watch. And they're more likely than men to make a decision based on whether they can stream their content on any device. This is kind of where we get this title, My Show on My Schedule, from. And if you go onto the Facebook IQ website and click on this, you'll see in a little bit more depth how certain groups of people, and women is one that we can call out here, are on the go, and when they're ready to watch, they want to watch it all at once. They're not really building their day around TV Guide. They're not coming home at 8 to catch a show and watch it. So they're going to be more likely to gravitate to a service that offers them the show on their time.
And one third point that we saw under research and is the influence that people have and that drive people to actually watch a certain type of content. As I said before, we see differences between TV and streaming on the preferences. So people on TV, they're more likely to be watching live shows, while streaming viewers, they're more likely to be watching movies and documentaries. So a closer look into what influenced these choices reveals that top way streaming users discover content through a friend's recommendation, and TV users and hybrid users, they're browsing the platforms for content. So we saw that streaming viewers, in comparison to TV viewers, they are 1.6 times more likely to be discovering new content based on a friend's recommendation, 1.9 times more likely to be discovering content on Facebook, and 2.6 times more likely to use their mobile device to find new content. Basically, we can see that this is happening because, first, streaming viewers, they're really intensive on, there is a lot of millennials in this group. We see that this group is a group that is highly intensive on mobile usage, on digital usage, and on friends connections through digital usage. So we see this happening a lot more intensively than on TV viewers that oftenly are just discovering by flipping channels. And media landscape is currently undergoing a transformation, and it's clear that whether your audience is streaming or traditional TV or a mix of both, the conversation is happening on mobile. We actually know that 98% of people that are accessing Facebook in the US today, they're doing it through a mobile device. So the rise among content-focused viewers now is the time to show that you're tuning to the right channels and your message is tailored to your audience. So
that's our kind of overview of the research, and I want to take you guys through a couple kind of takeaways where, you know, if we could say, if you took one thing away, or here, let's say 3 things, what would it be? So here's the first one. Know what they watch and when they watch it. Knowing when to start your campaign can allow you to be a part of the conversation at the right time. We know that, especially for these really popular shows, we can see these kind of conversation line graphs on our platform. But it makes sense to ramp up your campaign about 2 weeks before a premiere and to keep it running even for 3 weeks after if you want to stay front and center when you're messaging around a specific show. So don't give up after the finale, essentially, is what we're trying to say here, because the conversation goes longer than the run of the show. Now, in addition to this, we know that millennials make up the majority of streaming-only viewers, but the mix of ages among people who mix traditional TV and streaming means that we shouldn't leave any group out. It would be wrong to just target millennials, and we've seen a lot of people kind of hear this kind of millennials are the future type of thing, and you can miss out on people that actually really want your message that are still hybrid users of streaming and traditional TV. So remember that when you're targeting TV viewers, the experience still remains a critical asset and should be emphasized in marketing. I mean, a lot of these people are interested in getting their families around the television screen, and that's what we can see in conversation data. That's the type of language that we should talk to them using, because that's how they talk about it themselves. Also, the type of content that they're watching, live content, sports, news, that's the type of thing that we should be promoting. When we're talking about millennials, try to keep in mind that the content of the show, showing pictures of the actors, for example, a clip of an intense scene, that's going to be more palatable to them than a stock photo of a family coming around, even a young family going around to watch TV together. A lot of these people are on the go, and the content, they're all about that content. So the second takeaway that I'd like to talk about is using platform-specific messaging. Streaming users want to know that a platform has their favorite content on it before they even need to know the price, and they're willing to pay extra to get a better experience. That means we should avoid messaging the total amount of content. You know, we still see a lot of entertainment messaging about 2,000 channels, 1,500 channels. This is not working anymore. We want to focus on the selection and the quality. For cable TV users, though, I will say it's important to keep that price-focused messaging in your ads, as this group still sees that as the most important factor. And I just want to emphasize again that streaming users are content-focused. Emphasizing actual content in the marketing makes sense for that platform. So also keep in mind that when you're choosing your ad platform, you want to be able to target some of this messaging towards each group. We don't want to target that price messaging, that discount messaging that might work really well to cable TV viewers, to people that are signed up to Hulu and Netflix that are actually wondering, oh, Hulu, do you have Game of Thrones? No? Okay, maybe I'm not interested. That's the type of thing that needs to be addressed by marketers that are trying to target streaming viewers. And the third thing I'd like to kind of talk about here is that we have to leverage mobile and social for discovery. We didn't talk that much about this in the webcast earlier, but what we've seen with mobile and social use is that it's really big for finding new content, not just engaging people in content that they already watch. So be present on the devices that streaming viewers use. Gabriel was talking earlier about how important mobile is. If you're not already on board with that, now is the time. Well, yesterday was the time, but that's a necessary part of your strategy. Now let's build on that. How can, once you have access to mobile, once you're creating mobile content, how can we understand the connections people have with their friends? Because that's going to be critical to reaching them. Using platforms and creative that highlight content their friends are interested in is likely to be more effective in drumming up interest around a new show or movie. Okay, Zena, I'm sure the questions have been just rolling in, so if you have any, we'd love to take this next kind of block of time and answer anything that you guys might have. But I will put up this slide here where you can see, this is where you can find us. We have a monthly publication. We don't just do entertainment. We do tons of other verticals. We talk about holidays. We talk about the Super Bowl. Facebook IQ is an awesome free place to find a ton of insights that on our platform about what's going on in the market.
And you can see more details from this study itself. Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. All right, first question. How does Facebook IQ decide what to study? Why did you pick streaming as a topic?
So for us to be choosing a topic, it involves a decision that is taken along with our business side of the company on what is relevant, what is going to be interesting in the next few years, what is also going to be shifting behaviors in specific industries. So entertainment specifically, we have seen that there's a lot of change in consuming content of TV shows, and that's not happening only on TV anymore, and that's not happening. And even for streaming, we have seen a big shift on the recent years towards people that are even consuming more of their streaming shows on mobile, on any kind of device, and that's led by millennials. So basically, the decision is to show how marketers have to change the way that they have been approaching advertising based on people's behavior. So the behavior of people are changing, and also should the way that we talk to those people on how to communicate better our brand and the way that we should be influencing those people to buy and consume our products.
And I'll add one thing to that, which is that if you guys go and Google cord cutter, there's a lot of people talking about this right now, and that's something that made the way that we approach, after we pick that vertical, we still have to pick how we're going to approach it. And with this big Nielsen kind of bomb that they dropped last year, that people are cutting their cable subscription, we saw a lot of people talking about that, and we know that we have kind of a unique take, and so that's one of the reasons that we picked it.
Next question. How did you define the groups you studied, specifically streaming versus TV viewers?
Okay, so we have two different methodologies that we're using here. For our external data for survey, what we did was to define who was watching streaming or TV. We have two sets of questions that were basically watching how long people were watching either one of them, and we have a confirmatory question asking if they would watch more TV, more streaming, or a combination of both. And for the internal data, it's a bit different because we don't actually got to ask people. It's something that people are using our platforms and reporting themselves. So for internal data, we were basically tracking people that were discussing TV shows that were originally from TV, and we were tracking also people that were watching or discussing in our platforms shows that were originally from streaming providers. And that's basically how we did it. Is we tracked how people were talking about the specific shows. So we divided them, and then we did a demographic study on each of those groups.
You've used the term insights a lot. How is an insight different from a data point, and how does FBIQ create insights?
So one thing that I think makes FBIQ kind of unique, or at least that I'm proud of, is that you can go kind of anywhere to search for data points. When we say insights, and why we keep kind of using this term, when you go on our website, you'll see this term kind of plastered all over the website, is because it means, to me it means, and to us it means a data point that somebody can take action on. I mean, we don't want to just post a blog with a bunch of numbers on it and have you guys read them and say, okay, that's great, 77%, what do I do with that? What takes a data point into an insight is the context that we can provide using kind of two things: our platform and all of the kind of excellent information that we have on it, and then our Facebook IQ team. I mean, we have people, we have a big team of people that came from all different sorts of agency backgrounds, client backgrounds, that are all kind of coming together to kind of give free help to advertisers to take these data points and be able to actually create great ads from them. Because when you guys win, we win.
Yeah, I think that the way that we see is that we want to shift the advertising industry to producing more ads that have more quality overall. Mm-hmm. We've seen, especially in the early years of internet, how bad advertising can be online if you have no clue on what you're doing. So when we understand better how people are behaving and how they're actually consuming any kind of product and in any kind of industry, we help advertisers to understand how they should be reaching out to those people and giving the right message in a better format.
And it may be, I'll say one more thing on this. You know, everybody that's listening here has probably gotten a Facebook ad in their feed where they saw it and said, what the heck is this? And we want to stop that from happening because that person maybe didn't target properly or didn't craft a message properly. It's going to be better for both sides if people have insights on how they can best reach the audience that they actually want.
What was your favorite insight from the study?
I really like the binge watching stuff. I personally binge watch a lot of shows myself, and it's interesting how traditional advertising can kind of get amplified when you're binge watching a show. I mean, if you think about how when you were watching Seinfeld in 1998, you would get a couple ads, and that's kind of what you expected. You were watching your TV for 30 minutes or an hour, depending on your show, and you would get ads peppered in, and that was just what you expected. But if you're sitting down to watch a show for hours, because that's the time that you set apart for your whole week to watch the whole season of your favorite show, are you going to subject yourself to 100 ads? I mean, it's kind of an interesting challenge for marketers that I think is kind of fascinating, which is how can we beat this challenge of ad saturation when people are watching more content?
Yeah. For me, I think that the most surprising thing that I saw in this study was actually when we were seeing what's the main reason for streaming viewers and TV viewers to subscribe to a content provider is that for streaming, price was not the number one thing. And this is something that we see, it's really, I think it's throughout the industry, it's very common for us to see people choosing price over anything else. But when it comes to this for streaming viewers, both for people that watch streaming, either if they're watching TV as well or not, it was that the content was the main thing that they were targeting at when choosing a specific provider. And as Adam said when he was presenting this particular slide, that it's not that price doesn't matter at all, but it's not the number one thing that they're looking for when choosing a provider. So this was a great finding for me.
Next question, where does cable VOD and DVR viewing fit in? Those users are those users still considered traditional?
That's a really interesting question. I'm glad you guys asked that. So we did not cover DVR and home recording here, but it's a really interesting question. How do we define streaming versus traditional in these kind of in-between? Because a lot of what that's talking about is people taking shows that were created for traditional TV viewing and then watching them in a streaming type of way, like DVR and then binge watching, or fast forwarding through advertisements, which is something that a lot of people have been trying to address. So I wish I had a stronger answer, but it was really hard to kind of look at that. So I think if we did, and we will continue to do more research on this topic, we would kind of address this kind of even more of a hybrid mix of people that are watching shows created for traditional television on a DVR or other home recording devices.
Next question. What is the relative size of the three groups you identified?
That's a great question. So for this specific, well, when we're looking for the survey, this was controlled. So we basically have about the same size of people in each of the groups. But when we look for internal data and we see the conversation, we still see that TV show viewers, they're actually a much larger group than the streaming shows. We don't, unfortunately, I don't have clearance from my legal team to tell you exactly the amount, the size of the conversation between the two, but I can tell you that it's fairly larger between TV viewers than streaming viewers. It's actually a growing thing. We still see that we have a lot more TV shows today available than streaming shows, but we can see that the size of the conversation among TV viewers is bigger.
I'll add one thing to this, which is that if you go to insights.fb.com and you go to the blog, My Show and My Schedule, which is where we kind of write about this in more detail, we have a citation section where we pulled from Nielsen reports and other to kind of kick off our own study. And you can actually see more raw numbers on the actual size of TV viewers through some of our cited work in that citation section. So I recommend that you go onto the website, check out the blog, and then if you do have some of those questions about the industry as a whole, to check out that Nielsen report, which is a really comprehensive kind of numbers about these groups.
And our last question, what was your favorite TV show from last year?
You go. Okay. So, well, it's not by random that you saw Game of Thrones in one of our analysis. It's actually, I think that for me, Gabriel, it was the show that I followed the most. And even though it's an original TV show, I was watching on a streaming platform with that HBO provides. So I think that I'm pretty much using the mix of both there. And it was amazing to follow through everything and posting with hashtag winter's coming. That I was one of the millennials doing that.
So I have to say I'm definitely a millennial that watches more live events. I think I buck the trend a little bit. I watch a lot of sports, but I do have an interest in Japanese animated television, so I purchased Hulu subscription for this purpose alone. It's the only reason I pay for my subscription, and I pay for it without ads to get one very small subsection of television content. So I guess in that regards, I followed the study's pattern.
Those are all the questions that we have for today. Do you guys have any final thoughts you'd like to share before we close?
If I could just plug one more time, this stuff is all free. You know, I almost want to shake people sometimes and say, like, how are you not looking at this? Like, you know, we're giving you all of our data for free, and it's anybody can access, you know, the whole public, and we have tools and blogs and other things that you can go next time you're working on a campaign. Feel free, you know, take the stuff that we're working on and use it, because it's we really, our main goal is for people to come and feel like we're supporting them and that we're putting good information out there. So please use it.
Yeah. I back on that. And thank you so much for watching us or listening to us today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your presentation with our webcast crowd, and I do appreciate the time that you took to prepare for it, and I hope to work with you guys again. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your days. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.